Anne experienced a troubled childhood with her disturbed mother. Years later, she finds herself working in an exorcism school as a nun who cares for those who suffer from demonic possessions. When a familiar dark presence re-enters her life inside a young girl she's formed a close relationship with, she wonders if it might be the same entity that tormented her mother in the past. Late one night, Anne prays fervently while kneeling beside her bed. Seconds later, her mother knocks on the door and sweetly asks why the door is locked. When the young girl continues to pray and ignores the parent, the mother's voice suddenly changes to a loud, ominous tone, and the woman begins pounding her head on the door, demanding to come in. The door finally breaks open from the constant beating, and Anne screams in fear. Years later, Anne devoted her life to the church and became a nun. In a mandatory therapy session with Dr. Peters, Anne divulges her mother's history of mental illness, but admits she's always felt there was something more to it. Prodded by the therapist, Anne admits she doesn't have a name for the condition. Her mother would come to her room every night when she was a child. Some nights, she was a wonderful, caring mother, but other nights, she'd hum the same song repeatedly as she'd comb Anne's hair, and these instances typically ended with her mother hurting her. After the traumatic ordeal, Anne recalls her mother holding her and apologizing, saying the voices in her head made her do it. When the doctor tries to explain it as a classic case of maltreatment at the hands of a parent, Anne insists that it wasn't her mother that hurt her, but that she was possessed. Due to the rising number of cases of demonic possessions worldwide, the Vatican decided in 2018 to open up exorcism schools outside of Rome. In the St. Michael, the Archangel School of Exorcism in Boston, Anne's duty as a nun is akin to that of a nurse or caregiver, given that only priests can train in the rite of exorcism. One day, she passes by a class headed by Father Quinn on their way to the lower levels of the building. In Dr. Peters' class, the therapist lectures on the history of misdiagnosed mental illness and psychosis as the basis of most, if not all, demonic possessions. The centuries-old building they're currently in was built to free people of evil spirits, specifically by plunging them into the baptismal well. Anne challenges the doctor and asks if she's implying that there are no legitimate cases of demonic possession. Dr. Peters admits that in her tenure in the institution, she's seen things she can't explain, but what she is sure of is that the mind loves to play tricks on itself. The church's views have changed in recent years, requiring any person suspected of demonic possession to undergo a physical and psychological evaluation before being approved for the rite of exorcism. Later that day, Anne uses her card to enter an elderly male patient's room. She goes about her job, feeding Clark, the catatonic man. Then she heads to a new patient's room, where Dr. Peters explains the case to two priests. The young girl on the bed, Natalie, was admitted after having seizures that her mother believes are due to a demonic entity. When the doctor and priest leave, Anne befriends the young girl, who warms up to her quickly. That night, Anne holds an old comb and remembers how her mother would go from gently brushing her hair to suddenly pulling on it and hurting her. Disturbed by the memory, she places the comb back in the drawer. When she closes the windows, she sees Natalie's reflection in the glass, but when she turns around, there's nobody in the room. She walks to the door and sees a shadow from the other side. When she opens it and sticks her head out to check, she misses Natalie in the corner, but when she turns to look in the girl's direction, the girl has walked away. The next day, while walking through the hall, Anne faintly hears her mother's voice calling her name and a baby's cries. She contemplates finding the source of the sound, but when she convinces herself she just imagined it, she turns back around and is startled by Natalie standing behind her. The girl tells the nun she went looking for her last night, so Anne wonders how the girl got out of the locked room. Later that day, Anne hears a sinister female voice speaking Bulgarian and follows it into a classroom, where the priest listened to an exorcism audio recording. She quietly slips into the seat next to Father Dante. Father Quinn pauses the recording and explains the woman, Elena, was in the terminal stage, meaning her possession had reached the extremity of physical and spiritual corruption. At this point, deliverance of the soul is still possible, but death is imminent. Unfortunately for Elena, the priest committed several mistakes, leading to her demise. He leaves his students to ponder what they would have done differently had they been performing the exorcism. Later, Anne pores over books and recordings from the archives in the library, studying Elena's case. She translates a Bulgarian phrase Elena repeats and discovers that it means the voice. She recalls telling Dr. Peters how her mother said the voice inside her wanted Anne because she was one of God's chosen soldiers. Moments later, Sister Euphemia catches Anne researching exorcisms and takes her to Father Quinn. The nun reminds Father Quinn that only priests are allowed in exorcism training and advises Anne to keep within her duties as a caregiver. That afternoon, while Anne bathes Clark with a sponge, the blood rises through his IV line onto the saline bag. Suddenly, Clark begins humming the same song Anne's mother used to, so she asks how he knows the song. Clark ominously says they've been waiting for her. Anne lifts the sponge from the older man's back and sees the skin has burned beneath it. Then, the music from the speaker turns into her mother's humming. Frightened, Anne hurries towards the door, but it closes before she can escape. She presses the button to alert her co-workers when, all of a sudden, Clark is behind her, demanding that she let him inside her. The possessed man then forces her to waltz with him across the room while the song continues to play and the lights flicker. Finally, Anne pushes Clark off her, and the man lands on the floor, seemingly free of the trance. In Cardinal Matthew's office, Sister Euphemia suggests sending Anne back to the convent for her protection, but Father Quinn disagrees. He wishes to teach the young nun how to protect herself from the devil, with whom he thinks she has a long personal history. The next day, Anne joins Father Quinn's class as they head to the restricted level of the building for patient observation. The patient in holding is Natalie, whose recent behavior has baffled Dr. Peters. Fathers Dante and Raymond volunteer to head the exorcism, and Father Quinn cautions them that the demon will play tricks on their minds. The young men enter Natalie's room while the others observe behind the one-way glass. The girl turns to face the priests, her face contorting unnaturally. As they begin praying, the girl's eyes roll to the back of her head, and she crawls up the wall. Their mentor encourages the scared priest to continue the prayer despite the hissing demon on the ceiling. The lights in the room flicker as the girl jumps to the floor and slowly walks toward the glass, staring right at Anne. Natalie snarls and places her hands over her face. Stigmata opens on her hands, and maggots spill from the wounds. Suddenly, Natalie pounds on the glass, menacingly telling Anne to let her in. Father Quinn has seen enough, and he enters the room to deal with the demon himself. Natalie hides beneath the bed and pulls Father Quinn's legs from under him, causing him to fall over. Anne decides to help out and speaks to Natalie despite Father Quinn insisting she not deviate from the scripture. When Natalie breaks through the possession for a few seconds, she suddenly falls back to the floor, and her hair snakes into her mouth, choking her. While the young priest keeps the hair from choking the girl, Father Quinn and Anne recite the scripture. Suddenly, a demonic hand pops out of Natalie's mouth, startling the onlookers. Finally, Natalie is set free of the demon's hold. Father Dante spots a drawing of a pregnant woman on the floor. Later that night, Anne, Dante, and Raymond enjoy a well-deserved drink. Dante takes the drawing from his pocket and shows the others. He confides that his younger sister was taken advantage of in the past and became pregnant. She lost a child but has since been afflicted with possessions, prompting him to learn exorcism. While Anne returns to the observation room, she sees a covered body behind the glass. She enters the room and lifts the cloth to reveal her mother's cadaver. She turns to look behind her, but when she turns back to the table, the body is gone. Suddenly, her mother grabs her from behind, forcing Anne to wake from her nightmare. The next day, she visits Natalie, who speaks of the voice inside her that tells and shows her awful things. The girl also mentions seeing Anne in the visions. Later, Anne speaks with Father Quinn, who informs her that a transfer to the Vatican may be imminent if Natalie's case escalates into the terminal stage. Anne asks to be permanently assigned to the child, claiming a strong connection. This connection is precisely why the priest doesn't want Anne to get involved, believing only experienced exorcists can help the child. The next day, Anne sneaks into the archives. She then sifts through the files of the Vatican's many terminal cases and finds that most of them perished. Finally, she comes across the file of a woman released from her stay at the Vatican. Anne watches the woman's tape and is shocked when she removes her facial prosthesis, revealing a gaping hole on her mouth. She had cut it herself, racked with guilt from what she had done while possessed. The next day, Anne talks to Dr. Peters and recounts how, as a child, she'd hide from her mother when she'd chase her around the house, carrying the comb. Anne admits suffering through guilt for somehow feeling it was her fault that her mother eventually took her own life. Later, she tries to open Natalie's door using her card, but it doesn't work. A fellow nun informs her they've restricted access to the girl, possibly due to an impending transfer to a different facility. She then confronts Father Quinn to tell him to open his mind to the other methods they could use on Natalie, such as targeting her humanity. She believes there are unique cases where the victim has given control to the demon due to immense guilt. The priest asks her what Natalie could feel ashamed of as a 10-year-old child, but Anne doesn't have the answer to his query. Dejected, Anne leaves the classroom, and Dante approaches her with a plan. Having heard their conversation, he suggests she perform an unauthorized exorcism on his sister, Emilia. The shame of her pregnancy and losing the baby consumed her and compelled her to let the demon inside her body. If Anne can somehow get through to Emilia by making a human connection through the possession, maybe the method might also work on Natalie. Later, in Emilia's room, Anne sees hand marks covering the woman's abdomen. Seconds later, Emilia sinisterly remarks how the nun knows what it feels like to have something growing inside her, and Anne nods meekly. Suddenly, Emilia's stomach swells as she contorts in pain. The ceiling fan whirls violently until a single blade flies off and pierces the mirror. As the mass on Emilia's belly moves unnaturally, Anne continues to try to speak to the woman. The fan blades fly off and threaten to injure the people inside the room. Anne tells Emilia to let the guilt go and believe that no matter what, God's love for her will always reign over evil. She tells Dante to recite scripture from the Bible as she begs Emilia to forgive herself. Suddenly, Emilia's abdomen starts to shrink, and the woman gasps in relief, collapsing into the nun's arms gratefully. Minutes later, Dante and Anne rest by the balcony after the successful exorcism. She shares how she got pregnant when she was 15 and entered a convent. where the nuns then arranged for the baby's adoption. She only got to hold the baby briefly, wrapping a rosary around the newborn's wrist before handing her over. Anne's guilt for abandoning her child has been with her ever since. The next day, Anne brushes her hair with the ornate comb and remembers her mother crying beside her in bed, apologetic for hurting her. She looks at herself in the mirror and drops the comb when her left eye starts to hurt. After inspecting her eye in the mirror, she pulls a long strand of hair embedded in her eyeball. When she leans forward to wash her face in the sink, a dark shadow watches her from the corner. Seconds later, Sister Euphemia knocks on her door and takes her to Cardinal Matthews. In the office, she sees Dante despondently sitting by the table. The Cardinal breaks the news of Emilia taking her own life last night and Dante's mother telling him about the exorcism. He admonishes Anne for thinking she could do better than the church, and Father Quinn believes the demon deceived them and merely retreated to convince them that the exorcism was a success. Dante explains how it wasn't Anne's fault and that it happened because he was desperate. Anne understands the disappointment and thinks it best to return to the convent. Days later, Dante pays Anne a visit at the convent to tell her Natalie suffered a relapse. While inside the ambulance, Natalie took a priest and 2 orderlies' lives. They placed her in the catacombs beneath the school building to keep her away from the other patients. Dante believes the child only has a few hours left and might not survive a transfer to the Vatican. Anne asks him why he's telling her all this, so he shows her a rosary Natalie gave him, the same rosary Anne wrapped around her baby's wrist the last time she saw the child, revealing that Natalie is her daughter. Anne realizes the demon is using her daughter to get to her, and she won't allow Natalie to suffer for her. At the school, Anne and Dante sneak into the catacombs to get to Natalie. Outside the cell are 3 priests praying. When the demon senses Anne's presence, it expresses delight knowing the nun received its invitation, the rosary in her hand. Anne tells Natalie to let everyone else go, but the demon causes all the light bulbs to explode, wrapping the catacombs in darkness. The demon then sends the 3 priests flying into the air, slamming them against the wrought iron gates. Anne confronts the demon inhabiting her daughter's rapidly decaying body and knows it's the same demon that tormented her mother. The demon asks Anne why she gave away her child so easily. Anne reasons that she was only 15, but the monster argues it was because she witnessed her mother sacrifice herself to save her, while Anne could never do the same for her own. Anne concedes defeat and opens her arms. Natalie runs into her embrace, and the spirit transfers to the nun's body. Before the demon can take over completely, Anne tells Dante to take Natalie with him and run away. Anne's eyes turn black, she lurches her back, and floats above the ground. The gates close just as Dante reaches them, leaving him no choice but to let Natalie squeeze through a locked gate and hide. When Anne catches up to Dante, he begs her to let Natalie go, but the demon throws him against the wall. By the baptismal well, the demon grabs Natalie and chokes her. Suddenly, Anne hears her mother's voice telling her to let go of her guilt and that she's right there with her. During Anne's talk with Dr. Peters, she tells the therapist how her mother never stopped fighting the demon until the very end. Anne uses her mother's presence and strength to let Natalie go and bring herself closer to the well. The demon realizes what she's about to do, so it snaps her ankle to immobilize her. Anne stands on the edge of the well, then raises her hand, holding the rosary to burn the demon's face, prompting it to fall into the holy water. The liquid fizzles as the demon leaves her body in the anointed water until Dante pulls her out. The next day, a healthy Natalie visits Anne in her recovery room, and they share a warm embrace. Days later, Cardinal Matthews offers Anne an academic research fellowship in exorcism at the Vatican. Before she leaves, Father Quinn gives her one last piece of advice. Now that she knows the devil knows her, and she needs to be careful. In the taxicab, Anne sees an older woman on the sidewalk staring at her. Seconds later, the cab driver whispers her name. Suddenly, the woman is right by the car window, and the driver has moved to the back seat. Anne grabs the crucifix from her bag and recognizes that this is her very first foray facing demons alone.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.